and otherwise seriously jeopardizing the government's ongoing investigations. In other words, as our colleague Rachel Maddow likes to say, watch what they do, not what they say. And in this case, what Trump has done tells us exactly how dangerous he could be if he had known about Jack Smith's efforts to access his Twitter data. That is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former acting...
Nicole Wallace repeats DOJ and Democrat Party propaganda and lies.
U.S. Solicitor General Neil Katyal is back with us. With me at the table, Basil Smykel, a Democratic strategist and director of the Public Policy Program at Hunter College. Let me start. Oh, Glenn Drush is here as well, New York Times political correspondent Glenn Drush.
Who reports on the DOJ?
You, Glenn, about what Jack Smith's filings tell us about what has gone on. Me wants to just assert that cheating in a campaign is deadly serious. We just happen to be talking about a guy who cheated at democracy. And so I take your point about the relative...
I agree with everything you say.
Import of the other cases in relation to this one. But as we swing into a campaign season, I find it deadly serious that an American president was writing the checks that were part of his cover-up. SDNY found as federal election crimes. They name him individual one. I thought his criminality in this sort of batch of conduct was so brazen that as he runs for president again, it gives me a little bit of a pit in my stomach that this one may be justice delayed.
We are 100% in agreement, Nicole, you and I. I mean,
of course
it is a really serious crime. I don't mean to minimize it. It's just that we're talking about a guy who...
An insurrectionist,
committed serious crimes.
Nicole Wallace just called Donald Trump an insurrectionist.
To know what Jack Smith really thinks about the urgency of getting his election interference case into court. Now we're getting a brand new glimpse inside Jack Smith's thinking, and from Jack Smith's very real fears of violence. They come from what we're learning about efforts to gain access to Trump's Twitter account. Politico is reporting that newly unsealed court filings show that way back in April, quote, federal prosecutors secretly argued that if Donald Trump learned of their efforts to access his Twitter account, his public disclosure of the development could, quote, precipitate violence. And that attorneys working for special counsel Jack Smith worried that Trump would publicly announce the search warrant of his Twitter feed, just like he announced on Truth Social when his Mar-a-Lago estate was searched by the FBI last year. An announcement that was followed by a surge in threats against federal law enforcement, culminating in the fatal shooting of a man who had attempted to breach the FBI building in Cincinnati.
Listen to Nicole Wallace repeat Jack Smith and DOJ propaganda and lies on the fake news.
Describes as a, quote, minuscule amount. But the really chilling part of these new revelations is just how determined Jack Smith was to keep the disgraced, twice impeached, 4 times indicted ex-president from learning about their efforts to obtain Trump's Twitter data. Because they believed, as we said earlier, it would, quote, precipitate violence if and when the ex-president tweeted about it. Also from the filing, quote, these are not hypothetical considerations in this case. Following his defeat in the 2020 presidential election, the former president propagated false claims of fraud.
This Jack Smith DOJ filing says that the former president propagated false claims of fraud. They are lying in this filing, and Nicole Wallace repeats the lies.
I think the meta thing here is a picture of how Jack Smith views the former president. He views him as a guy who has tried to overturn the election, who's called for violence, who will do what it takes to try.
Donald Trump did not call for violence. He called for peace and told everyone to go home. Neil is a liar. Fake news.
What he thinks it takes to obstruct the investigation. And I brought that back in April. And the picture painted by Jack Smith in this filing that's been unsealed today is that Donald Trump is like a mob boss, someone who is just bent on trying to prevent trials, trying to prevent testimony from coming out. The guy is afraid of the truth coming out in court.
So, Neil Contiel, yesterday, just to pick up on your point about Trump as a mob boss, Pete Strzok made the pretty haunting observation that the FBI now has to protect itself. Certain agents working on the Hunter Biden investigation, for example, have to be protected by a special unit inside the FBI. It would have, and Pete Strzok made the point that even those agents involved in the Al Capone investigation didn't need to create and erect a special unit inside the FBI to protect the agents who were working on those cases. We're almost in post-mob parallels. And I want to just read from the indictment about the violence. Of course you want to read
from the indictment. Against Donald Trump. One for January 6th, the other for the documents he stole at Mar-a-Lago. Far more important. And if you listen to what Trump said yesterday on Megyn Kelly, you realize just how easy the Mar-a-Lago criminal trial is going to be. I mean, his only defense was the Presidential Records Act, which says nothing like what he says it does, and it's a defense to Trump's crimes the way drinking bleach is a defense to COVID. That is to say,
gosh, fake news. If Donald Trump took his boxes as president illegally, then what about Joe Biden's boxes he took as vice president? Neil, what about those boxes? You're fake news. You're fake news, and you're fake news.
Not at all. You know all of the players that we're talking about. I'm imagining you're not surprised.
I'm not surprised. And
Democrat strategist right here.
I thought about advice that Hillary Clinton, when we worked for her in the Senate. I'm not surprised. And actually reading the story, I thought about advice that Hillary Clinton, when we worked for her in the Senate, used to give all her staffers. I hope she doesn't mind me saying this. She used to tell all of us, don't major in the minors. Don't focus on the noise. Always center your work around public service and the people that you're affecting. And that's what Alvin Bragg is doing. You know, he's got history working against white-collar defendants. So he understands the games they can play. He understands the ways they can marshal resources to kind of come at the office. And he has had this posture where he said, I'm not going to try it in the media. I'm going to take my time, be methodical, be deliberative and declarative so that, you know, so that the jurors.
Will there be accountability on these charges for Trump?
Yeah, I agree with you, Nicole. I mean, Alvin Bragg crossed the Rubicon. For the first time in our nation's history, a former president was indicted. And I certainly remember exactly where I was. I was next to you on your show. So, but it was not the most, of course, significant crime. It's serious. Like, I mean, paying hush money to a porn star, having this major campaign benefit that was undisclosed. You know, that's an important thing, but it's certainly not on par with like a coup to topple democracy and install yourself in power and throw out the results of an election with fake electors and, you know, God knows what else. So, you know, I'm glad to see Alvin Bragg basically have the perspective, which not all elected officials or government servants do, of saying, you know, my case isn't necessarily the most important. There's something else really more important. And so by signaling that up front, and now the judge picking up, but Donald Trump took the reverse path. And the result is now FBI agents, law enforcement are worried. So talk about, you know, protecting blue and protecting cops and law enforcement. No way. I mean, these guys, you know, stood by and encouraged violence against law enforcement.
Liar.
You know, Glenn Thrush, there's something extraordinary.
He's talking about Donald Trump and the January 6th protesters.
About where we are in terms of our understanding of law enforcement's understanding of Trump's role in putting the violence in motion. We were talking yesterday about the efforts to protect election officials. They're being protected by the FBI, while their FBI agents being protected by a special unit inside the FBI. There's a constant escalation from Trump, so the threat mushrooms. But on Earth One, you almost run out of people to protect the institutionalists protecting the institutions. Where does DOJ see this at a crisis level, or you know, where does
act? You know, when the mob boss tries to obstruct justice, in a way you kind of expect that. That's part of what you do. You're the mob boss. We're talking about a person who is the former president of the United States and was the president during the time of those text messages that you were referring to a moment ago. And you and I have talked about this before. You worked for a president of a different party, George W. Bush. I worked for Barack Obama. But I think the thing that both of us saw was that there was no way, no minute in which it was about them and not about the country. That is, if they were in a situation in which some people were going to enact violence, even for their benefit, they would have been the first ones out there to say, no way, And I've had every difference in the world with your former boss, but I know that that's the type of person that he was, and that, frankly, every president outside of maybe Richard Nixon has been. But Donald Trump, but it's also, we show lose sight of this, Nicole,
Adam Schiff is a liar. So is Nicole Wallace. Listen.
Nice things about me, and it's as simple as that. And of course, there's the economic incentive for Trump too. He's always wanted that Moscow Trump Tower, and he knows Putin holds the keys to that potential future real estate deal.
Donald Trump decided against building a Trump Tower in Russia. Adam Schiff is a liar. It is not a potential future real estate deal.
He is easily manipulated by Putin. But also,
criminal.
Here you have Putin now scraping the absolute bottom of the international barrel, going hand in hand to Kim these sops to the right wing and the MAGA crowd.
Now the headline underneath Adam Schiff, Democrat, is McCarthy pressured by MAGA right lawmakers to open impeachment inquiry into Biden. Listen.
In his conference, it just brings the whole institution lower. And the people who are going to ultimately suffer, the American people, I think they will shut down the government. So many of us.
He said he thinks they will shut down the government.
Just want to focus on bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the fentanyl crisis, attacking inflation, attacking climate change. The real problems.
Democrats increase the price of everything.
Facing the American people. Instead, Kim McCarthy's going to expend the nation's time and attention on this evidence-free impeachment something or other, even as they shut down the government.
Prison for Joe Biden.
Just based on your role in Truss, Mitch McConnell's declaration that, quote, they nailed him, the impeachment managers of Donald Trump, with Republican House members' confession that there's zero evidence linking President Joe Biden to anything worthy of an impeachment. What do you make of the sham, we try not to call it an impeachment inquiry, but a speakership clinging to by Kevin McCarthy going on in the House?
Idiot.
Well, it is such a contrast from the methodical way we went about gathering the evidence in the first impeachment and the seriousness with which we took the responsibility of finding high crimes and misdemeanors to what we see today, which is essentially an evidence-free impeachment proceeding of some kind. And for what? Because Kevin McCarthy needs something to throw the right-wing base in order to get them not to shut down the government? Is that now what the standard is going to be for impeachment in the future? That if you're a very weak speaker and a single vote to